Hi, and welcome back to Continual. I am going to be your host this evening, Jim Nettles, and tonight we are talking about paranormal romance and suspense around the holidays. So we're going to be having a lot of fun tonight. And so before we get started, we're going to go around the room and let everybody introduce themselves. So Dawn, since you're the first time contestant, we'll let you go up first.
My name is Dawn Dehel, and I write under the name DS Dehel. I'm now a full-time writer, former teacher, and I'm so happy to be here.
Nancy?
I'm Nancy Northcott. I write historical fantasy for Falstaff Books. I also write paranormal romantic suspense and plain romantic suspense. And with Jeannie Adams, who's not with us this evening, I write science fiction mystery adventure.
So let's dive a little bit into some of the fun of the holidays. So what is it about the holidays that make that call for, having a bit of that suspense, having a bit of the romance? So let's start with the suspenseful side of things. What is it about the holidays? Is it all of the family drama, wanting to ramp that up? What is it for you guys? So Dawn, I'll actually start with you.
I think all of my favorite holiday stories have some element of suspense in them. And if you think about it, even as a child, that idea of suspense, right? What am I getting for Christmas? And when is Santa going to be here? And when are we putting the tree up? I think it's just inherent in our storytelling. And the oldest storytelling stories that were told were always scary stories, which is part of the suspense genre as well. And that's really always appealed to me growing up and even as an adult.
What about you, for Nancy?
Well, for me, putting suspense in a holiday is a way to raise the stakes and add some jeopardy. And in a romance, the suspense actually plays up that aspect of it too, because sometimes the element of danger makes people kind of re-examine their feelings for other people. And so for me, the holiday is really more of a backdrop to the story. Occasionally it's a factor in the story, but sometimes it's just a backdrop. It depends on the particular story.
So now let's kind of flip this and go the other direction. What about the paranormal aspects? Now, obviously, I have a big love for kind of all those things that go bump in the night. And, when we're coming into the holiday season, this is going into winter. This is going into that period. I mean, a lot of the oldest Christmas stories that we know and love really are paranormal stories, be it Christmas Carol, things like that. So what are those influences for you? And so I'll go to you first, Nancy.
Well, for me, I have these paranormal Christmas stories, paranormal romance Christmas stories, because they're part of a series that's paranormal / fantasy romance. And so it wasn't so much like, well, I'm going to do Christmas and I need to inject some paranormal elements into it, so much as it was, I want to do Christmas stories in this series, and there's an expectation that these will be paranormal because they're about mages, who some people call wizards. And so the characters aren't themselves if we don't have the paranormal elements in it.
What about you, Dawn?
For me, the holiday stories were, the paranormal is inherent in holiday stories. Growing up, I was a dancer, and this is Nutcracker season. And if you really dig into it, Nutcracker is a shifter story. Right? You've got this object, that becomes a human. You have all of these people and figures, sort of changing who they are, and the Mouse King and all of that. And of course, Christmas Carol, which is the ghost story. For me, they go hand in hand. So my Christmas stories in particular, they springboard from that idea that this is the time of the darkest of the year and anything can happen. And that's really where I start and work from there.
So let's talk a little bit about the stories you're writing. So Dawn, look at the stories you're writing, especially the holiday tales. What is it? Let's talk a little bit about them. Who's in them? What's the story? What's going on in them? And really kind of what brought you to tell this particular story?
So I actually have to admit that Christmas is not my favorite holiday, like a lot of people. And so I struggled when I first went, when I saw a call for, I write for Ecstasy Books, and they had a call for the 12 days of Christmas. And I was like, all right, give me a day. And I got Nine Ladies Dancing, and I was like, well, what am I going to do with this? And I just said, well, I want to tell a ghost story. And that's what I went with. And so it's set right at the new year in 1899. And sort of riffing on the Downton Abbey idea. You know, she's an American, she's got money, she's going to find herself a rich British guy, and she stumbles into the middle of a very complicated wooing situation where nobody's who they seem. And so that was the first one. I had so much fun writing it, and I didn't think I would. I just thought I was going to sort of fulfill this call. And then I said, all right, the next year I got 7, and it's 7 swans. And so a swan had to be in there. And I really just played with the idea of Swan Lake. You know, what would Swan Lake look like now? And so just sort of turn the preconceived notions on their head. You know, I don't know if you know about Matthew Bourne and his all-male Swan Lake, which is really lovely. And so I was playing with this idea. And then it's set around Christmas, but it's more than a backdrop, because Santa Claus, of all people, ends up playing a very crucial role in all of that. But it was fun to take ideas that I thought I knew, and then really kind of squish them together and turn them into this lovely sugar plum confection of a story. So,
And we've got another mystery guest coming in. Who could it possibly be?
I'm Kim Fielding. Hi, and I write gay romance, horror, fantasy, science fiction, a little bit of everything.
So Kim, since you are catching up a little bit, so we were talking.
Sorry.
Oh, no worries. It's that if somebody's not late now and then, it's not the holidays, right? You got to come to the party late.
There we go. I'll use that excuse.
Yeah, that's fine. So it was traffic.
Yeah, sure. Right. Yeah, it was terrible traffic.
So we're talking a little bit. What are kind of the suspenseful elements, and what are some of the kind of the paranormal elements that draw you the holiday stories? And in your holiday stories, what are kind of those elements that pull you in?
I like the contrast between the sort of the happiness and sparkle and glitter of holidays, and maybe the acknowledgement that also there's sort of a deeper underbelly sometimes of holidays too, and that there can be some sort of weird family dynamics and just weird stuff, and that a lot of holidays may have pagan roots. So I like that sort of, you know, that there's this sort of upper layer that seems very shiny and sparkly, and underneath it there's more stuff going on, and that's always something that I really appreciate. And I think it's something I guess that contrast is something I often kind of play with in my own stories. So I wrote one particular holiday story that was not paranormal or fantasy, but it was the most depressing thing. It was like 20 years of bad, horrible things, but with a happy ending, you know, so.
So let's talk a little bit about your holiday story. So why don't you tell us a little bit about it? What drew you to write the holiday story? What kind of brought you in on that one?
Sure. So my holiday story this year is called A Very Genre Christmas, and I had a huge amount of fun. I have a very exciting cover there for you, but it's on pre-release right now, and it combines a couple of my favorite genres. I love noir. So the story is set in the 1950s in Portland, Oregon, and it's got a very hard-boiled private detective, you know, so think, you know, you just think Maltese Falcon, that kind of thing. And the town in Portland, there's something called a genre rift in a bookstore, and periodically a being gets thrown through the rift into the bookstore from some other literary genre. So that was a lot of fun because although I never name any of the specific books that they're coming from, I think sometimes I'm hoping readers will be able to identify them. On this particular day, it's a Christmas elf. So, not the kind of Lord of the Rings elf, but this is, Santa's workshop type of elf, and he gets thrown through the rift, and my detective has to help him find his way back home. But along the way, of course, he becomes a little bit less hard-boiled as he interacts with the Christmas elf. So again, we have this contrast between this very dark, seedy, hard-boiled noir detective and a sparkly Christmas elf who likes hot chocolate and shopping and the rain and everything, and has a very optimistic view on life.
But he's not a dentist.
He's not a dentist. No, he's an artist. He works in Santa's workshop.
So and yeah, I'm gonna have fun with that. So Nancy, what about you? What are the holiday stories you're bringing on this time?
Well, my holiday stories fall into two categories: paranormal and not paranormal, both with elements of romantic suspense in them. The paranormal ones, Gigi's Magic Christmas and Magic and Mistletoe. The holiday's more of a backdrop. The Magic and Mistletoe premise is, can a bookworm and a badass find love? Because the villains in this series are ghouls. They can't reproduce among themselves. They kidnap humans and mages to reproduce with, and sometimes to have snacks with, because they can only eat fresh kill. And so they appear in everything. So that's my little dark note for Christmas. So in Magic and Mistletoe, Roland is a deputy shire, which is like being a deputy U.S. Marshal, and their job is to fight ghouls and protect people. And Perry is the very quiet, very bookish teacher at the school for the wizards. And he's got a huge crush on her, and she feels that he's a nice guy, but he reminds her a lot about the tough guys in the neighborhood where she grew up. He makes her nervous. And so that's kind of the starting point of the story for them. And in Gigi's Magic Christmas, it's the opening line is, well, toward the beginning, it says, once Gigi walked in the house, she would no longer be Deputy Shire Gigi Gonzalez, noted kicker of ghoul ass. She would just be Gigi, the last unmarried daughter. And so it's a friends to lovers story with the guy next door. And then my Christmas story in Christmas at Canham Castle. What do you do with spies at Christmas? Spies celebrate Christmas. They want Christmas too. And so that particular story, they're all part of my Arachnid Files series. Arachnid is an international multinational, sponsored by a consortium of nations agency that was created to go around the rules that bind everybody else, which leads to a certain amount of tension because the other agencies resent the fact that Arachnid can run around and do things they can't do. And Arachnid resents the fact that these other agencies frequently get credit for what they've done. So that's kind of the setup for the whole series. And the hero in Christmas at Canham Castle, my story, The Last Favor, is a spy. And his dad has just died a few months before, and he's getting an award from the Castle Foundation. So the hero has come to pick up his father's posthumous award. Only too bad for him, there's an assassin who has him in his sights. And so his partner comes along to guard his back, because this is one thing he won't back out on. As long as there's no danger to anybody else, he's going to pick up that award for his father. And being surrounded by all these families reminds him that his family is gone and it's just him. And it kind of makes him wonder whether the solitary life of a covert agent is really what he wants in the long term. And it makes her long for the kind of family Christmases that she never had growing up. So it's not so much the paranormal or the spy elements in particular, it's more the character elements and where they fit in. That's kind of a long way to come to that, but that's the bottom line.
So looking at that, as we've got a lot of action and adventure here around the holidays, what are kind of the big holiday elements? What's the one thing that you said, if I'm telling this as a holiday story, I've got to have this in there, whether it is an Easter egg for you yourself personally, whether it's something that you just said, this really makes holidays for me, this makes holidays for readers. what's the one thing that you slipped in there that you just had to do for yourself? And so, Kim, I'm going to hit you up first.
I like a lot of different holiday stories. So I think the one thing that I always put, whether it's something I'm reading or something I want to write, is I like some acknowledgement of the traditions, and the fact that everybody's traditions can be a little bit different, but it's those the things that those sort of stereotype things we think about, whether with every holiday, whether it's St. Martin's Day or Christmas or Hanukkah or whatever, and I like to make sure they're in there, even if just a little bit.
What about you, Nancy?
Companionship. The holidays are a time to get together with people that you care about, and so that happens in all of my holiday stories, because that to me is part of what makes it a holiday, and it's what drew me to Gray's story in The Last Favor, because he used to have that even if it was just him and his dad, and now he doesn't. And so for me, that's a component that runs all the way through. And I love holiday food, but I'm not a cook, so I just don't go there.
Dawn?
I fall in Kim's camp. I think I really like a nod to the traditions, and in The Seventh Swan in particular, he doesn't understand the world that he's in now, and so she really enjoys explaining to him, well, this is how we do Christmas tree now, because there's a bit of a time shift in here, and so bringing in those kinds of old and new, and you'd say, well, this is how I did it, well, this is how we do it, and then the meshing of the two as they build a relationship. I really enjoyed that, this nod to things that must make Christmas, and then trying to find new common ground. I tend to write about outsiders, so this Alice in Wonderland, where am I? And in Kissing Strangers, the other one, she's in England and trying to find her footing in with the aristocracy, and even though she comes from money, she just has no clue, and just trying to not make a fool of herself, but trying to bring in some of the British traditions, which are different from our own, and this clash of worlds, and trying to figure out where does she even belong here, is one of the questions she struggles in that.
So looking at and talking about it, because again, especially because we're playing with a lot of noir elements, we're playing with a lot of risk, we're playing with increasing the stakes. And Nancy, you talked a little bit too about a lot of the time the holidays are the backdrop, but you still can't entirely disconnect the fact that you're in the holidays, whether it's a core to the story of trying to pull it forward, whether it is the thing that binds characters together, whether it's the thing that creates the romance or even threatens the romance. What are the things about playing in the holidays and specifically the romantic elements that you had a lot of fun with? So Nancy, I'm going to start with you for this one.
Well, the holidays tend to bring out sentiment in a lot of people, and I think that feeds pretty easily into romance. And that's really kind of a factor in everything with the holidays, because if it's a romance, that's a man and a woman who maybe look at each other, or a man and a man, or a woman and a woman who maybe look at each other not quite the way they did before, because the holiday is making them think about things a little differently sometimes. So I think it's just the sentiment of the holidays for me that plays into all different kinds of romances.
What about you, Dawn?
I think to piggyback on the idea of sentiment, it's there, but I also think there's a lot of pressure when it comes to romance around the holidays as well, to get it just right, or I'm not involved with someone, or it's been terrible in the past, what is my future going to be? So I think that almost automatically raises the stakes, because we all come to the holidays with so much baggage, for want of a better word, and I like to play with that idea. And it's also a time of endings and beginnings with the new year, because they just run, they spill right into each other, and that you can't escape that even if you have a perfect Christmas, you're getting ready to end the new year and, you know, get right into the new year and all the pressure that comes with that. So um, I think that's inescapable. And I think that sort of raises the stakes, you know, as you play with ideas.
What about you, Kim?
I'm agreeing with a lot of what Don said. There's something inherently stressful about holidays. You know, even if they're wonderful holidays, there's small and large stresses. So that creates some natural conflict, which is a really good way to sort of spark a relationship or a romance. And to make things happen, to make things move forward in those sorts of relationships. And it's also a time of year when people naturally start thinking a lot about connections and family and what they mean and maybe the past. And that's also a really good way to move relationships forward.
Yeah, can I just add something to that?
Sure.
There's also a lot of pressure in some families to make like a Norman Rockwell holiday.
Right.
And I love Norman Rockwell's paintings, but families come in all kinds of different configurations. And those configurations don't necessarily fit that very traditional mold. And sometimes there are family currents that kind of boil below the surface while everybody's trying to do peace and goodwill and please pass the sweet potatoes, that nobody wants to be the one to fracture that veneer, I think. And that can, I've never written a story like that, but I would think that would put pressure on the characters as well.
And those kind of, you know, all families have a history, and you know, maybe throughout most of the year we don't have to think much about the history, good or bad, but the holidays are a natural time. You know, maybe people you don't see all that often, or because you kind of rework those traditional family roles that you're not thinking about much during the rest of the year, and so it brings that, dredges up that history, which can be a wonderful thing, but for some people it can also be problematic.
And I think there's sometimes competition in families, you know, who can have the most perfect Christmas or the best Christmas card or whatever, to that goes into that Norman Rockwell kind of, I like that idea, kind of veneer, to borrow your word. I think there's just so much conflict, which they, like, not to diss the holidays, but it's rough, you know, when you're trying to spin all of these wheels, and I think things can come apart really quickly. That's appealing as a writer.
Well, and I saw something in a newspaper advice column, and you know, I've been married for a long time, so this is not on my radar screen anymore. But it was like, well, you know, I'm not sure I really like this guy. Should I break up with him before the holidays, or should I wait till after the holidays so it doesn't ruin the holidays? Should I get him a present? And I had forgotten the world where those considerations mattered. And that could be really stressful on both sides, all sides, for the holidays.
Not to mention the meeting the family, if you've got a new relationship, you know, the meeting the family and the working out which holidays do you spend with which family members and that kind of thing. That's really stressful for some people.
Of course, the whole, just family in general, you know, because people tend to fall into tropes in a family as much as they don't want to. You know, you're going to have that person. My daughter showed me a picture of t-shirts, and you can just go ahead and it's like the wine drinker, the best cook. She's like, maybe we should just go ahead and get this and label everybody. So my son's girlfriend knows who everybody is, you know, in the holidays.
But one of the good things about this from a writing perspective is that with this kind of holiday sort of angst, it's so familiar to a lot of people that it's really easy for readers, I think, to connect to holiday stories. Maybe that's one of the reasons why they're popular for readers is, you know, even if you don't even celebrate that particular holiday, you can sort of identify with the issues going on. And I think that's a good thing.
You know, I read a holiday romance had a Thanksgiving scene in it. It was a male-female romance by Kristen Ashley, and I think it's called Wild Man. It's part of her Dream Man series. And there's a big scene at the family Thanksgiving. The hero's ex-wife shows up and things get difficult. But the thing that I remember that's kind of pertinent to what we're talking about is the hero's younger brother brings a different woman every year. It's like his the women he sees are in rotation, and she's at Thanksgiving because it's her turn. She came up in the rotation. But it's clear to the heroine that the woman has no idea. And furthermore, that she is really serious about the hero's brother. And so that's a kind of thread that gets picked up as the story goes through. And it was an interesting thing. I'd never seen anybody play with a holiday like that before, but I thought it was an interesting way to kind of springboard their little subplot through the rest of the story.
You have to wonder if she intended, like, you know how sometimes things just happen when you're writing, like, wonder if she was just composing, going, you know, this is fantastic, I'm going to keep going with it, and then see where it goes.
And then what happened? Yeah. The question that will get you in trouble, especially around the holidays. So looking at all of that for your stories, is there a big element of found family versus blood family and kind of what you want to call traditional relations? You know, is there a lot of found family in the stories you guys are telling for this season? So Kim, we'll come back around to you.
Sure. So my private detective in the great tradition of private detectives has no family. You know, he was basically thrown out of his family as a kid, and he's been on his own. And yet he maybe doesn't realize as the story begins that he has a little bit of found family. He has a secretary who is actually Carmilla the vampire from one of the very first vampire stories written in the mid-19th century. He doesn't really realize she's a vampire. He just knows she's a really great secretary, you know, and so, you know, they're friends, and he's got a couple other friends, and then of course he meets the elf, and so there's definitely this element of him. He maybe hasn't even admitted to himself that he misses having a family, and part of the story is him acknowledging that and reaching out to do something about it.
What about you, Nancy?
Found family plays a very big role in my Light Mages series in general. It's not specific to the holiday stories, but the core group of characters are a found family. There's, in one book, one of the characters refers to the other as her brother of the heart. And in the spy series, it's not that so much. It's more like comrades in arms. But I'm a big believer in found families. The Legion of Superheroes, the Justice League of America, done right, they're found families. And so I wanted to write one, and my Light Mages are my found family.
What about you, Dawn?
Yeah, all about the found family. In the Seventh Swan, it's sort of presented as a fairy tale. And so she's unable to go see her family. And so she's out on this land that she's inherited, and the swans that she goes to feed every day become her family. And so when one of them is a shifter, actually there are four of them that are shifted, but one of them stays, he really becomes the nucleus of her new family. And she thought that she had lost everything with the death of her aunt and not being able to go see her family. And she realizes that, you know, she actually had rejected the whole idea of Christmas. And then she realizes that no, you know, there is something else. And in Kissing Strangers, well, she's looking for a new family. And she both finds and loses it at the same time. It has not a real happy ending, but I love the ending because it just sort of it works, but it comes out. You don't really expect the ending, and she is okay with it at the end. You know who she is and who she's become, and the new family she's creating. So yes, found families are the best because you get to pick and choose.
So kind of coming and playing with part of my favorite part of holiday season. I mean, we talk about Christmas magic. We talk about all of the different elements that are coming into this time of year, whether it's the holidays and the power and the energy of family and friends and the things that come up that create conflict. Or if we look at the power of traditions and the way that traditions can influence what we do and who we are. If we look at things, you know, like you were mentioning, Dawn, that idea, we go straight from Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's. we pack a lot of holidays, a lot of family time, but there's also just so much tradition in there, both from, you know, a larger cultural aspect, but also the family traditions and things that go on and happen. So when we look at that and kind of what we would consider the more paranormal aspects, the supernatural aspects, the spooky aspects, the things that aren't part of our material world, how much fun did you have playing with that? And what are the elements there that really pushed you for that? So Dawn, I'll actually start with you on this one.
Yeah. For me, one of my favorite Christmas songs. It's the most wonderful time of the year, and it has this strange little line in it. There'll be what tales of the glories and Christmas ghost stories, something along those lines. And I was like, that's such a weird line, but our oldest stories, so there's before our ghost stories, and that just called to me. You know, how can, you know, I play with the ideas about like Gown in the Green Knight, and you know, the and a Christmas Carol, Dickens's Christmas Carol. You know, that's this idea that there's a world underneath, which I think a couple of us have talked about, that contrast. You know, I think part of it comes from the fact that that's the reality for so many people. Not to be a downer, but you know, there's this glitz and veneer, but so many people don't have that kind of Christmas. Well, how can I take this idea and make it into something approachable, and work with it? So I think both of the stories are about how life isn't what you want it to be, and then let me just make it fun by throwing in, you know, a shifter and throwing in. I didn't even know I was writing a shifter story, actually. Somebody had to point that out to me. And that's how involved I was. So I'm like, I've never written a shifter story. I'm like, are you kidding me? You have. And then, you know, what's more Christmassy than a ghost, right? You know, who is past, present, and future all at once. You know, so that's where it is for that supernatural. It's just there. Everything's dark this time of year. You know, and that's what I did with it.
What about you, Kim?
Sorry, there are so many natural ways to incorporate those kinds of traditions and things into holiday stories in paranormal sorts of ways, because a lot of them themselves have that aspect. So Don just mentioned the ghosts. Last year I had a novella out called A Christmas Present, and it was sort of a modern twist on Christmas Carol, told from the point of view of the ghost of Christmas Present. You know, so you know, here's a story that's already got this. I mean, there's ghosts, right? And so that was fun. And last year I also had a story called The Solstice Kings that takes place at the winter solstice and takes advantage of the mythology between the battle that happens at the winter solstice between the Winter King and the Summer King. And, you know, they defeat each other twice a year. And of course, you know, love and war are really closely intertwined. So that was fun to play with. And then in this year's story, thinking about how we can take those, you know, those Christmas elements like Christmas caroling and you know, and put those into this very noir world and play with those was a lot of fun. So I think it's really inspiring as a writer to find ways to play with those.
What about you, Nancy?
Well, my people are magical, so that's already worked into that series. For me, the challenge was to find a way to put action and ghouls in a holiday story, because the series features battles between mages and ghouls. That's what the series is. So if I put out a short story or a novella, these are short stories as it happens, that doesn't have that, then it's not meeting reader expectation. And so the challenge was, how can I work in the dark element that's in my story universe with the holiday and still have a holiday story? And so that was kind of fun. But, you know, I really love battles. I mean, magical energy zipping through the air, sometimes stuff blowing up. And so anytime I can find an excuse to do that, I'm going to do it.
See, now I'm just picturing a holiday shopping trip to the mall. You've got it all covered. You've got ghouls. Oh, wait, sorry.
Hey, I would rather hide in a closet than go anywhere near a mall on Friday. I mean, those who love it, more power to you, but I'm not there.
So looking a little bit more, what is the one kind of tradition? What, again, looking at the holidays, what's the one thing that you guys are looking forward to this holiday season? So kind of playing around, you and wanting to get back into whatever part of the traditions. Because I mean, after, we've been through a couple of years now of it's not quite been normal. But we're getting back to much closer to what we're used to have. We're able to get together as family and friends, at least a lot better than we have been. So is there anything that you're really looking forward to this particular holiday season? So Kim, I'll start with you.
Sure. For the past, up until a couple of years ago, every year at Christmas time, my husband and I have gone for a week's vacation with my brother and sister-in-law. And we've gone someplace really fun. We did Vegas for a couple of years, and then we did New Orleans. And obviously that didn't happen last year, but that's happening again this year. So that's something I'm really looking forward to. And also seeing both of my kids. My younger daughter is out of state in college. So having everybody back together again, at least for a little bit, is something I'm really looking forward to.
What about you, Nancy?
Decorating the tree. I love decorating the tree. We have friends that we haven't seen in several years. They moved out of state. They used to always come and decorate our tree with us. And they moved when our son was like 7 or 8. So he barely remembers these tree decorating sessions. But there are several ornaments they gave us for our tree. So every year when we pull those ornaments out and hang them up, it's a reminder of the pleasure that we used to have from decorating the tree with them. And she actually, the woman in the couple, was a cross stitcher, and she cross stitched 4 Christmas panels and mounted them on gold highlighted holly print on a black background with gold braid. And so every year when we take that out and put it under the tree, because our friends are Jewish and they love Christmas celebrations, but she said, I'm not having a tree. That's, for them, that was a bridge too far. But they would come over and enjoy our tree. And I really kind of miss it, but they live across the country. So I don't know if we'll ever be able to do that again, but I have these wonderful reminders of these Christmas seasons that we spent with these friends.
What about you, Dawn? Knowing that Christmas is your favorite holiday.
Honestly, for me, growing up, Christmas was Nutcracker. I was 9 the first time I was in the Nutcracker. The last time I was in it, I was about 20. So I spent all those years, in the Nutcracker. And then I was pulled back in to be stage manager for another 10 years. And so much of my life is wrapped around the Nutcracker. And of course, live performances were just not possible. But this year they're going to happen. And for me, the holiday comes together in that moment. And hopefully everybody knows the Nutcracker, when the miniature overture ends and there's this breath and the music begins before the curtain rises. And I know it's going to happen. I know the little girl, and there's going to be a tree, and it doesn't matter. For me, that moment is new all over again. And I think that's where the magic of Christmas, and dragging people along and making them enjoy this ballet that's kind of terrible in many ways. That's really what I'm looking forward to, that being able to sit there, not in front of my TV, but in the audience and watch children just go, oh, there's Santa, oh, there's mice, that suspension of disbelief. And I think that's something we all really need, that engagement and fantasy and hope, and that things can be sweet and wonderful at Christmas time. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
So before we get here and start working towards wrapping up, what's the one thing in your books that you want people to take away to kind of bring them back that little bit of happiness and joy or angst, or what do you want them to get out of that and feel from your holiday story? Because again, we're talking about romance. We're talking about love and found and family and friendship and all the things that go on. But at the same time, we've got to create some angst. We've got to create a bit of risk and danger. So what's the thing out of the stories you've told for this year that if somebody picks it up, what's the one thing you really want them to get out of it and feel? How are they going to come away, feeling at the end of it? So who wants that one first?
I'll go. I want them to feel satisfied and happy. You get to happily ever after by different routes, but if they're smiling and they're satisfied and they're thinking, well, that works, then I'm happy.
What about you, Dawn?
Yeah, no, I like that. That what you said about everybody gets happily ever after by different routes, and yes, that's, I think that when you finish it, it's kind of bittersweet. But I think in some ways Christmas is bittersweet because you think about people who aren't there and people who aren't here, and that feeling of having come full circle, like, okay, this is great. I can go have cocoa or whatever you do for Christmas. I think it's what they'll take away from it. Just this, maybe not ecstatic, but just content. That's what I want them to walk away with.
Kim?
For me, I think it's a sense of optimism or hope, that no matter what paths anybody has traveled, that there's hope for the future, which I think, maybe something that's particularly in need nowadays. And this sense of that there's everybody can change, life can change in good ways, and that we can look forward to what's to come.
Well, as we're wrapping up and working our way towards the holiday season, let's let everybody know where to find you, what your holiday stories are for this year, where they can find them. And of course, website, social media, all that kind of good stuff. And if you've got any last fun messages for everybody out there, let's do that as well. So we'll work our way around. So Nancy, what about you?
Well, I don't actually have a new holiday story for this season. I have my holiday stories from seasons past, which are sort of around me there. Like I said, Gigi's Magic Christmas and Magic and Mistletoe are paranormal romance with suspense elements, and the others are spy stories. And you can find them at www.nancynorthcott.com if you want more information. They're on all online vendors, so you can find them there. And you can find me at nancynorthcott.com and on Twitter, where I'm at Nancy Northcott, and I spend far more time than it's probably good for me. So I'd just like to thank people for watching the panel and hope everybody has a wonderful holiday season.
What about you, Dawn?
So like Nancy, I don't have a new Christmas story for this year. I do have, it's called Kissing Strangers. So it was the 10th day of Christmas and the 7th Swan, which was the 7th day of Christmas. Those were published with the Ecstasy, but you can find it at all online vendors as well. My newest holiday story is actually a Halloween story. I keep looking at Trick or Treat. So that's it's actually not dissimilar to the ones that I've been talking to. I can be found at dsdehel.com. I tend to lurk more on Facebook and Instagram, where again, I'm just Dawn Deal. I'm not terribly creative on that. And I also would like to wish everyone just the happiest holidays they can have this year.
And what's the Halloween story?
So the Halloween story is called 9 for a Kiss. And actually a couple of other writers and we got together this idea of a maze, a corn maze, and it's in all 4 of our stories. But it's a Halloween story where she is lost in a maze and a raven rescues her. But there's a whole lot of magical portals that go on. She gets to visit different times and places while she does that. But because I can't not write a dark story, it's very clear from the beginning that she is in a coma. And so it's about ends and beginnings, and he is there from the Irish myth to help her find her new life, if that makes any sense. And so it's it's a bit of a bittersweet, scary story at the same time, but there's a lot of fun things that happen in it. So
Perfect for reading next to the Christmas tree and the holiday fire.
yeah.
Kim?
I have 2 new holiday stories out this year. One is a Hanukkah story. It's called Dreidels and Do-Overs. It's a contemporary gay romance about 2 middle-aged guys, one of whom has had a pretty difficult life and is putting his life back together, and the other one is kind of deciding to follow his dreams, and they run into each other at a holiday fair. So that's Dreidels and Do-Overs. And the other one is one I already mentioned, a very genre Christmas. And they are both available on Kindle Unlimited and KU, and you can find links to them on Amazon, and you can find me at kfieldingwrites.com, and I'm K Fielding Writes all over social media. So. Oh, and I'd like to wish everybody really happy, peaceful, joyous holidays, and some time with loved ones.
And I have been your host this evening. I am Jim Nettles, and you can find me at jamespnettles.com, authoressentials.net, and of course here at ConTinual. And I want to wish everybody happy holidays. Have all the best. And of course, if you've been enjoying all the stuff we're doing, let your friends and family know so they can come and join the party. And we will see you again soon. Happy holidays, everybody.